Hey guys, Preston here. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be discussing and breaking down Notre Dame's wide receiver room for the 2020 season. Rocking the Chase Claypool throwback jersey from this past season. Still want a green Notre Dame jersey. That'd be great to have. Got to find one. But yeah, there's a lot of question marks with this wide receiver room, notably because, well, he is gone now. He's with my favorite NFL team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so actually the top three receiving yard getters from this past season are all gone. One was a tight end, but still your top two wide receivers are gone, and Chase Claypool and Chris Fink, which means there's a lot of open slots for younger guys to try to make a name for themselves this year. Obviously, being a college team, there is a crap ton of wide receivers on this Notre Dame roster, so I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to talk about some of the main ones as well as all the freshmen, maybe break down a couple of the other people too, briefly mention them, look at some of their stats and whatnot. So, the biggest thing for this year is going to be that 2018 wide receiver class is pretty highly touted. We're going to see it's their turn to finally, break out, show themselves, show what they have. We're going to talk about a lot of those guys. The first person we're going to pick up with is someone, unfortunately, who's not going to play week one. By the way, week one's only so not this weekend. Literally the weekend after, Notre Dame is playing Duke, first game of the year. But unfortunately, the guy who's sort of been listed as the projected favorite to be the number one wide receiver this year is going to miss time, maybe even up to a month or two, due to, I believe it was an ankle injury, and that is Kevin Austin. Might be Kevin Austin Jr. He didn't get to play at all last year. He was suspended, which isn't, it's never great, character sort of concerns. But from what I've heard, he's doing better this year. Obviously, the injury sucks. But all of last year, he was highly touted. Everyone from players to coaches was talking about how well he looked in practice. Obviously, it's just practice, but that's a good sign, that he's very talented. We've known this for a while. Coming out of high school, he was a high 4-star and the 14th ranked wide receiver in his class, 82nd overall player nationally, so a top 100 prospect. He is 6'3", 185 pounds. That's what he's listed at on 247, which is what I'm using. By the way, you see me looking over here, it's because on the laptop I have stats and the recruiting profile from 247 up at all time for most of the guys I was highlighting. So, yeah, the rankings I just gave you were from his 247 composite rating, which I believe is probably the best thing to look at because it, combines a bunch of other people's rankings along with 247s. He chose Notre Dame over schools like Clemson, Auburn, and so on. Like I said, very highly touted, very good. The background's great. There's a lot of potential there. The height is amazing, which is something you want to see when you lose Claypool, who's 6'4", so having a guy who's like 6'2", 6'3", because they're different. All right, so 247 says 6'3", but then the stat site claims that he is 6'2". He hasn't had much playing time, like I said, due to injuries and whatnot. The being suspended and then injured this year. Granted, this year hasn't even started, but the 2018 year, his actual true freshman year, he did appear in his 4 games for the redshirt limit and had 5 receptions for 90 yards. So all the hype is just hype at the moment, which is unfortunate. I think you can be optimistic about Kevin Austin. I think he will perform. He was highly touted for a reason, and he hasn't disappointed anyone in any of the practices he's had. So basically, he had double redshirt years. Count the suspension. He still got the practice, and he looked very, very solid, and he was looking good this year too before the injury. So hopefully he can come back strong from the injury. But for now, we got to talk about the guys who are going to play now in light of Kevin Austin being injured. A guy who is looking to take one of the boundary slots, I believe, would be Brennan Lindsay, former 4-star athlete out of Oregon. He is listed at 6', 175 on 247, and he is a speed demon, is what you'd call him. He is a track star in high school, and most of his stats last year came from flash plays. So that's the only thing that's a little bit interesting. Most of his best plays and almost all of his numbers were not from typical wide receiver things. There was a lot of reverses, screens, stuff like that. He's listed at 6 on 247, but 5'11" on the sportsreference.com, so I don't really know. I just know he's fast as crap. But we'll check out, like I said, he played last year, his redshirt freshman year. He played in 9 games. He had rushing, he had 13 attempts for 200 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns. And receiving, he had 11 receptions for 254 yards, averaging 23 and 2 touchdowns. So the whole total, you put them together, he had 454 yards and 4 touchdowns his redshirt freshman year. Obviously, he was not the starter at all. He was, every now and then he showed up as number 2. They kind of had a rotation for that other outside wide receiver spot this year. I should have paid more attention to that, if I'm being honest. But not bad. And like I said, he flashed a lot, mainly because of the speed. The dude is freaky fast. He's very athletic. Like I said, track star in college. He will look to make a bigger impact this year for sure. I want to see if 247 even... I don't see a listed 40 time, unfortunately. But the dude is definitely fast. I know that much. He chose Notre Dame over multiple schools, the main one being Oregon. Oregon, I believe he was actually committed to Oregon at one point and then, canceled it. And Notre Dame eventually convinced him to come over to us. Yeah, Oregon, California, Colorado, Michigan State, Purdue, Stanford, USC. He actually only had 11 offers, mostly Pac-12 schools, so he's a good find for us. Very fast, and like I said, should have an expanded role this year. Most of this wide receiver room, you have to just focus on. There's nothing to look at except potential because none of them have really gotten a start. There's kind of a thing, though, there's a common trend with Notre Dame, and obviously it happens in most colleges, though. But I think it's very noticeable Notre Dame is these kids, they sit on the sidelines for a while, and they just learn. And then when they're playing, they're balling out. Boykin, Claypool, a lot of these guys were good, but no one thought they were going to be crazy, and then they get that starting role, and they ball out and do what they're supposed to, and I'm pretty confident this 2018 class can do the same thing. So it looks like some sort of combination of Kevin Austin, when healthy, Brennan Lindsay, Bennett Skowronek is the next guy we're talking about. He's definitely more of an outside receiver, and he is listed at 6'3" on 247. He was originally a 3-star prospect who was committed to Northwestern, had the 118th wide receiver in the nation, so nothing crazy. But he did really show himself as a valuable player for that Northwestern team. He was actually a team captain before he transferred to us, which is something you like to see. He's a grad transfer, so technically this would be his last year, but it's all a mess this year, if we're being honest, due to the fact that I believe the NCAA ruled that no one loses any years of eligibility for this season because the whole COVID mess and certain conferences canceling. So that would technically mean if he wanted to, he could play another year next year, I believe, unless there's some weird exception with the grad transfers. I am not sure. We'll have to look more into that, but there's a chance he can be here 2 years. Either way, he is 6'3", 224 pounds, so he's got the size, not the same size as Claypool, and definitely not as much of a freak athlete, but Ian Book does like his big targets, and having a guy like Skowronek on the team who has reliable hands and was a team captain, a good leader of a guy. And for what I've seen, he's already has a good relationship with Ian Book, just, social media posts and stuff, and it's never a bad thing for your wide receiver to be friends or friendly with your quarterback. I think most people would agree with that. So his main years we want to focus on is 2017 and 2018 when he was healthy enough to play. He had 45 receptions in each of those years, going for 644 yards and 562 yards, respectively. And you got to remember, this isn't a very bad Northwestern offense. The quarterback play was never great with him, especially that 2018 season. And in 2019, he only got to play, I think it was maybe 3 games, obviously because he still got the red shirt and keep another year of eligibility as a grad transfer. He had 12 receptions for 140 yards before going down with an injury. He's a very solid option. He made a good play against Notre Dame, actually, when we played them in 2018. I think he'll be very solid. There's a good chance he gets plenty of playing time on the outside. I'm guessing they'll do some sort of rotation until some guy kind of really stands out. But I think with Kevin Austin out, it's really even a better opportunity for Ben Skowronek to be one of the starting boundary guys, at least to start the year. Due just to he has a lot more experience than any of the other guys. Most of these other guys is a grad transfer already. That he's had multiple years starting where none of these other guys has. And he's just a big target who has an established relationship with Ian Book. So I'd look to see a lot from him. I hope he stands out, and let's get some. Hopefully these transfers can do well for Notre Dame this year. So if we keep focusing on some of these outside guys before I move into the slot, obviously there's 3 NFL talk, freshmen who came in this season, with the most notable being Jordan Johnson. This man is a beast. I don't think we talked about him enough. I think it's unfortunately just because he was ended up listed as a 4-star, and so Notre Dame fans weren't as hyped because we kind of expect 4 stars. But him, along with Chris Tyree at running back, we'll talk about eventually, were both 5 stars when Notre Dame recruited them. But of course, they got demoted after we recruited them. There's been a pattern, unfortunately, with Notre Dame, where it tends to seem like as soon as people end up committing to Notre Dame, it's highly unlikely they actually go up in rankings. They usually end up going down. And so he is one of them who ended up being a 5-star to now he's a very high 4-star. He is the number 6 wide receiver in the nation from his recruiting class last year, 37th player nationally. That's a top 10 wide receiver in his recruiting class and a top 40 player in the country. That is great. That's fantastic. Guys, Notre Dame hasn't had they recruit decent, but they don't always pull in guys like this, and I think this is something that really should really be appreciated, and I think we shouldn't overlook this kid. He will probably get playing time this year, just because obviously with the redshirt rule you can play 4 games anyways and still get redshirted, but also pair that with the fact that the way it's all this year, it's weird. You don't even have to really redshirt anyone this year. If that eligibility thing stands, that means he won't lose a year anyways. He could play all 10 games and still get to play next season as a freshman. So I don't even know how that's going to work. I guess they might not redshirt any of the... That's a whole other conversation, because you could just not redshirt any of the freshmen this year and then redshirt them next season when they're freshmen, and then it extends their eligibility by 2 years. So either way, like I said, Jordan Johnson should get playing time this year. He is listed at 6'1", 182 pounds. I'm guessing he's hopefully put on a little bit of more size since then. He actually has a scouting report from 247, so I'll read a little bit of that since none of the other guys have seen one so far. They said, let's see, classic outside receiver build, outstanding ball skills and hand-eye coordination, shows strong concentration and ability to catch the ball in contested situations, great body control and athleticism. So he has the ability to develop into a true number 1 receiver in college. See, that's something you like to see. And he's actually, the comparison they used was Keenan Allen. So if he ends up anything like Keenan Allen, that'd be great to have. From what I've read, he's actually looked pretty good in coverage so far. I mean, not in coverage, in practice so far this year. Like I said, highly touted being the number 6 wide receiver in the country. He obviously chose Notre Dame over schools like Alabama, Auburn, Florida, a bunch of other big-time schools, notably Alabama. It's a huge thing, and we landed in. It's not very often Notre Dame gets to have a player that Alabama wanted. It's great when that happens. Very solid prospect. Look for him to make an impact, too. Like I said, I need to see more from these practices. I want to see if Kelly's really said anything about who's standing out. But I do have a feeling we're going to get kind of a rotation going, kind of like the beginning of the year with running backs when they're trying to figure out who would break through and kind of be that starter, get most of the carries. It's going to be the same thing with the wide receivers this year. So look for Jordan Johnson to make an impact. He'll obviously be competing with the rest of these guys to get outside playing time. He'll get playing time regardless, but the amount of playing time he'll get. But he should make a big impact. Now, let's move inside real quick before we get to the other 2 freshmen, because the other 2 freshmen I like, but they're nowhere, in notoriety compared to Jordan Johnson. It's not close. So we'll go with the projected starter in the slot this year, and that is Lawrence Keys III. He's also from that 2018 wide receiver class. Not as highly ranked as the other guys. He's still a 4-star, but he was listed as the 47th overall wide receiver in the nation, and one of our few prospects from Louisiana. Keys has a lot of potential. He's listed at 5'10 and a half. But, yeah, he's a good slot guy from what I've seen. But then in the scouting report, they have him as 5'11. So who really knows? I haven't got to see a lot of Keys. He did have some playing time, which we'll get to. We'll talk about his stats a little bit. But Kelly and the staff have seen high on him. He's actually a 3-star from 247. But in the composite, he's a 4-star. So he's one of those guys. But he did have an offer from Alabama, Texas, big school, so even Alabama was interested, like I said, which is always nice. That's a pretty good showing, especially for a wide receiver, to know that he's a good prospect to begin with. From New Orleans, stats-wise, real quick, we'll get into that. He had 13 receptions for 134 yards last year. Obviously, he was stuck behind Chris Fink, the former walk-on, who did beautiful for Notre Dame here. But like I said, the kid's definitely, I believe, Keys is definitely more athletic than Chris Fink was. Fink was more of he was very dependable. I don't know exactly how great Keys' hands are. They don't really have any stats on his drops or anything. But like I said, he only had 13 receptions last year, so he wasn't targeted a lot. It's another guy where you're just relying on potential and that recruiting profile being a 4-star who Alabama wanted. And the coaching staff has not really said anything negative about Keys. So he should be making an impact. Like I said, there's a lot of unknowns this year, which is, it's not like last year. And so we'll have to see what he can do. It's really time for him to prove himself. Like I said, he's part of this pretty highly touted 2018 Notre Dame wide receiver class. Oh, I forgot to mention that pretty much all of them, all the guys I've mentioned from that 2018 class are listed, they're redshirt sophomores right now, which Notre Dame really doesn't use they don't say like you're a redshirt sophomore. But because they do this the fifth-year stuff, they say you're a fifth-year senior instead of like a redshirt senior or something like that. But either way, yeah, they're redshirt sophomores and more, common knowledge things. Real quick, I have the scholarship chart up real quick, so I'll quickly go through this so we can just talk about these briefly. The 3 freshmen, they're actual true freshmen, are Jordan Johnson, Jay Burnell, and Xavier Watts. I'll talk about Burnell and Watts a little bit later. The other guys we covered, all those 2018 class people, Brennan Lindsay, Kevin Austin, and Lawrence Keys are the main ones. Those are all redshirt sophomores. But you also have Joe Wilkins and Micah Jones as redshirt sophomores. Micah Jones is a freak size-wise. I'll show it real quick. But from what I've heard, he hasn't really done too much to separate himself from the other guys. Unfortunately, he was a 4-star, 63rd ranked in the country. But the height's where it's at. So he has the size. He just hasn't really been putting it together. He's 6'5", 206 pounds is what he's listed at. But unfortunately, like I said, I think mainly it's his hands. He's had some issues dropping balls. And so it doesn't really seem like he's going to make much of a role for himself this season, which, sucks to see. But the potential's still there, and with size like that, he can probably still he'll probably get some snaps this year still, which will be nice to see. So hopefully he can kind of make a name for himself and get out there eventually. Like I said, it all depends. He'll probably get to play at some point later on in his career, but this year he probably won't get a lot of notoriety. Another wide receiver is Joe Wilkins, who was originally a 3-star athlete, 59th overall. I believe he was actually originally brought on board to play cornerback, as he's listed as corner on 247, but he is definitely a wide receiver now. It seems like he's more of a depth kind of guy. I think he has potential. It'll be interesting to see if he does anything this year. Like I said, I think obviously when you have receivers rotate, so he'll get some sort of stats this season. It'll just be interesting to see what he can kind of do. I like the kid at 6'1", 194, but he's definitely more of a depth kind of guy than someone who will make as much of an impact as the other people we've mentioned already. Avery Davis is someone we need to talk about. He is like the Swiss Army knife of this Notre Dame team. He's played corner, wide receiver, and running back all while Notre Dame, but this year he is listed at wide receiver, and from what I've heard with Brian Kelly, he's going to be taking snaps in the slot with Lawrence Keys. I believe Lawrence Keys is probably the favorite to get most of the reps at that position, but you never know for sure. He was originally recruited as a dual-threat quarterback, but he's played all over the place, a 4-star kind of guy. Very athletic. Last season, he had 10 receptions for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns, which isn't bad, so there's potential there. I mean, maybe if keeping him a wide receiver and letting him continue to work at wide receiver instead of trying to keep moving him everywhere, hopefully that'll help him with the development. So yeah, look out for him in the slot. So Austin and Davis are your main guys in the slot. Everyone else are your main outside guys. Davis appears to be a redshirt junior, just in case you were wondering. There's one more senior. I think he's like a grad senior, I guess you could say, because I forgot to mention, Michael Young also left the Notre Dame program and transferred to Cincinnati, but he wasn't going to make much of an impact anyways. That is why he transferred, and he ended up with a group of 5 program. No disrespect to him. I wish him the best. Cincinnati's a very good program. The other wide receiver we haven't talked about is Javon Mckinley, another guy competing for reps on the outside. He is a former 4-star recruit, and he is listed at 6'2", 194. He's from the 2016 recruiting class, and he was the number 18 wide receiver overall from that class. But yeah, like I said, he hasn't shown a lot just due to the fact that he's already his final year of eligibility. Technically, he'll have one more due to the, red shirt stuff. And so he had offers from Oregon, Tennessee, Washington, other schools like that. Very good kid, plenty of potential. Let's see if he has any really interesting stats I can look at. Sorry, guys. This is probably the last kind of after this, we'll look at those two freshmen. I'll give kind of an overview, and then we'll kind of go from there. Yeah, last season he had 11 receptions for 268 yards and 4 touchdowns, so some pretty much more than any of the other people, him and Davis. And so it's like I said, it's interesting. There wasn't a lot of returning production this year. I do think that these 2018 kids have more potential than this guy. But, experience and being 6'2" really helps out, especially in a year like this when you don't have as many practices, no spring games, stuff like that. The experience could help him win out maybe. Like I said, these kids are all fighting for spots. Then I think there is plenty of potential in this wide receiver room. I'm not as down on some of this. Obviously, they're unproven, but we brought them in for a reason. It's not like these were all like lowly recruited guys. Like I said, this year we brought in the number 6 wide receiver in the country. Keys was a top 50 wide receiver. Lindsay was a top 10 athlete in his recruiting class. Kevin Austin, the most notable one, was a number 14 wide receiver in his class too. So like plenty of guys, top talents in the recruiting classes at their positions. Obviously losing Austin sucks, but he should be back at least in time for the Clemson game, which is beautiful because he could help us a lot. And then so hopefully he rehabs good and comes back strong. But I do think these other guys will fill in fine, especially when you got kids like Jordan Johnson coming in who will be a beast, guaranteed. At my word, he will not bust. He will definitely be a beast. And a lot of other hungry guys looking to make a name for themselves, all with decent pedigree in their recruiting backgrounds. The other 2 freshmen coming in are both 3 stars, so not crazily recruited, not super high ranked, but they did flash potential, and there's a reason Notre Dame was interested in them. And we'll start with Jay Burnell. Jay Burnell's made a couple plays in the practices, at least the clips we've seen so far. Decent height at 6'1", 200 pounds. He's out of Massachusetts. He's a true freshman. Actually, so on one half they have them listed 6'2", one half they list him at 6'1". But either way, decent size, like I said. Recruiting wise, like I said, all I have to really go on is recruiting profiles. So I mean, he drew interest from. He's 122nd ranked wide receiver in the composite, 780th player nationally. He drew interest from decent schools though. Most notably would be Michigan. We landed him over schools like Michigan, West Virginia, UCLA, Boston College. So, like I said, not super highly recruited, but Michigan showed interest, and so did we. It's not a bad thing to have. Yeah, sorry, I'm looking at... Yeah, I guess this receiving room's pretty good, so not much to be worried about here. And Xavier Watts is the better of the two. There's actually a lot of people who kind of said Xavier Watts was kind of underrated recruiting-wise. They didn't give him enough looks. He's actually, there we go, that's what I'm talking about. Xavier Watts is a 4-star from 247, not the composite. He's a 4-star by them, the 46th ranked wide receiver. But in the composite, probably due to other recruiting platforms like Rivals and some other ones, he is a high 3-star, 65th overall wide receiver. So depending on how you want to look at it, this is a 4-star wide receiver. High 4-star wide receiver who chose Notre Dame over schools like Nebraska, Iowa State, etc. So there's a lot of potential there. I should have looked at that first. I just see him as a 3-star, but he is, at least in some platforms' eyes, a 4-star talent at 6'1", 191. Good size. Like I said, kind of underrated, obviously, but the 4-star helps. He also had offers from Michigan and so on. But being in Nebraska and, not some sort of powerhouse school, that kind of led to that. But he has a lot of potential, too. So look for Watts. Watts might try to carve out a role for himself this year. But to me, Watts and Burnell seem like more of redshirt candidates than anyone else. Although, like I said, technically you don't really have to redshirt anyone this year. So I'd look for Notre Dame, if we're being honest. This wide receiver room's good. I don't think it probably won't be as good as last year, just to the fact, Chase Claypool was a second-round pick wide receiver, and none of these guys are quite there yet. I think they'll get plenty of playing time and experience this year, and I think the wide receiver room will be even stronger next year because these guys will get playing time and experience to grow. But, yeah, I look for Notre Dame to rotate early and often, kind of beginning of the year. Obviously, they play mostly an all-ACC schedule, but these teams aren't super tough. You get Duke and USF back-to-back your week 1 and week 2, so I'd rotate these kids a lot, get the young guys in there, especially for that USF game, because we should definitely, Notre Dame's good enough to pound them and get younger guys in for some playing time and reps before we get into the thick of the ACC things. But like I said, Clemson's really the only team I'm worried about this year, but hopefully, by then these kids will all have more experience. Clemson's like at least midway through the season, so we'll see what happens. But I like this wide receiver room. We know what you guys think of this wide receiver room. Who do you have starting? If injuries weren't not a concern, I'd probably think it'd be Keys in the slot starting, Kevin Austin and Lindsay on the outside starting, with Skoranek getting plenty of reps on the outside too. But Austin's out, so it'll be interesting to see who else steps up. I think rotations will occur. They always do. It'll just be interesting to see who earns roles and who gets what. Someone will stand out from the pack, but potentially wise on paper, like I said, because there's not a lot of numbers to look at, just pure potential this year, these wide receivers definitely have the skills to make an impact and be very solid, and I like them a lot. The size is great. We've recruited wide receiver well recently, and I think that trend will continue in 2021 and 2022 with Lorenzo Styles Jr. already being committed to us in this 2021 class. I'll show him for you guys real quick just to give you an idea of the kind of players we're getting. Because I did that last time too. I mentioned the 2021 quarterbacks. So Lorenzo Styles is listed as the 20th receiver in the nation in the composite, a high 4-star at 95.12. Not a 0.95112. That's a very good player. Just outside the top 100 nationally at 113. Chose us over offers from Auburn, Ohio State, Florida, etc. Very solid player. They're also crystal ball delaying another 4-star in Jaden Thomas, who is out of Georgia. He obviously has offers from Georgia, I believe Michigan, some other schools. So these are the two. If it all goes well, these will be the two guys we do land. So 247 downgraded him because obviously they did because they're disrespectful. So 247 has him at a 3-star, but the composite still keeps him at a 4-star. He is choosing between Penn State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Georgia, and Arkansas. He doesn't have a confirmed commitment date, but at least according to Crystal Balls, it's looking like he's leading Notre Dame. So he'll be a good get for us at 6'1". So even the kids coming in next year are very solid. Hopefully we can land one more. But yeah, sorry. Once again, let me know what you guys think about this wide receiver class. I'm saying yeah and stuttering too much. I like it. I can't talk as much about them as I'd want to because obviously, like I said, they don't really have facts on paper. It's all on paper. Like I said, there's no actual statistics and numbers for me to really dig into because none of them really gotten to play that much. But I am very confident in this wide receiver room. I know some people aren't, but I am. So hopefully you agree with me here and you trust me that these wide receivers will make a name for themselves. As soon as next week, we'll get to see them ball out against Duke. Thank you guys for so much. Wow. I'm losing it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I have things to click, so I have a playlist up here. You can check out my other Notre Dame positional breakdown so far. It's the quarterbacks. Make sure you check that out. Look at what we're working with this year and for the future. I kind of break that down. You can subscribe by clicking over here. Please do that if you enjoy these videos. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me, and I'm going to continue to upload and hopefully gain more subscribers as we go. And over here, you're going to see whatever YouTube video of mine that YouTube recommends for you. Who knows, maybe it is the Notre Dame one already. Either way, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe to join KMA Nation. My mouth is dry. I'm losing. I don't know. This is KMA Preston signing out. I'll see you guys later.